Welcome back again for the first time ever to Hi, my name is History. Welcome back again for the first time ever to Hi, my name is History. I often feel like I'm living in some kind of endless cycle that's already been played out before. Sometimes it's difficult to feel hopeful about the efforts I make now, as if they won't just be retried 20 to 30 years from now by someone with a lot more passion, conviction, and talent than I ever had. I'm afraid that it's true. History repeats itself. Our video today is centered around my hometown, Elmira, New York, and more specifically, Brand Park, and even more specifically, the Brand Park Memorial Pool. I grew up just a few blocks from here. My family moved here in the summer of 2004, and the pool has been permanently closed since the summer of 2005. So unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to swim here. But I did spend most of my summers getting my ass handed to me in a to-go container on these basketball courts. For nearly 20 years, I've been driving by this pool, dreaming of what it once was and what it maybe could be again. Aside from the graffiti that the city used to paint up and the boards that they put up now after the occasional break-in, the pool has been completely left alone to rot. So what's so important about a decomposing pool? Is it just an eyesore that so many people claim? Or is it a historic relic that needs to be saved? To answer those questions, we're going to begin by taking a trip. Upstate New York, 1779, there had been an increase of attacks on early settlers from Native American tribes who had become British loyalists because, they were settlers settling in someone else's backyard. In what is now commonly known as the Sullivan Expedition, August of 1779, General George Washington ordered General John Sullivan to lead an army to drive out the Native Americans. You could say that Sullivan's efforts were monumental in the continued settlement of Europeans in the area. Once all of the Indians were driven out, it was basically used as an advertising pole for early settlers. Great farmland, no Indian attacks. Fast forward, a Sullivan Expedition veteran's son, John Sly, was one of the first settlers here in Elmira. John Sly and his wife purchased nearly 1,000 acres and raised their 13 children in a Greek revival home that they had built together. It has since been torn down. As of this video is a mobile gas station, but by tomorrow, who knows? One of John Sly's many children, Catherine, inherited much of her father's land. Around 1856, she had begun selling off a lot of that we now know as the south side of Elmira. A local businessman named John Brand was one of the people that bought land from Catherine, specifically the acreage that we now know as Brand Park. Throughout the 1850s, John Brand Sr. began planting and harvesting tobacco and had established John Brand and Company with his son, John Brand Jr. John Brand and Company became a pretty prominent business in the area at the time. Throughout this period of time, the area that we now know as Brand Park was the Buttonwoods for not only the tobacco, but all the other really luscious plants that are said to have been growing there at the time. Around 1900, John Brand Jr. donated Riverside Park to the city, a beautiful area with fountains, flowers, and walkways that he and his father had built. A quote from the Star-Gazette in 1901 says, "It was the most favored recreation ground in the city, and it was destined to eclipse Eldridge Park." At a public forum in 1909, The city council unanimously voted to change the name of Riverside Park to Lincoln Park to honor Abraham Lincoln's 100th birthday. Supposedly, Brand didn't want a park named after him and was happy about the decision. But within 6 months, the name was changed back to Riverside Park at another council meeting. But somehow, ultimately, the park has been known ever since as Brand Park. So now Brand Park is about to get a major upgrade. It's the 1920s, everybody's roaring, and the local Lions Club raised the funds necessary to buy a public pool for the city of Elmira. Enter Wesley Bintz. While working as the Lansing city engineer, Wesley built his first pool in 1922 in Lansing, Michigan. And that's this pool, the J.H. Moore's Memorial. This is often considered one of the first Wesley Bintz pools.
This pool in particular has been, when it was listed on the National Register, it was listed as national significance because it is the oldest, plus it's not a true prototype, but it's almost a prototype.
And the pool has a similar history to the Brand Park pool, both previously being parks owned by wealthy businessmen in the early 1900s and then donating them to the city, and then both of them later receiving a Wesley Bintz pool. It seems that with the success of building the Moore's Park pool, a light bulb went off in Wesley's head. With a master's engineering degree in his back pocket, a chip on his shoulder, and a passion for pools, he resigned from his position as city engineer later that year and dedicated his life to building swimming pools. He established the Bintz Pool Company in 1923, just a year after this pool was built. But what made these pools so significant?
He had a very unique and unusual design. He would send his salesmen from town to town wearing wide-brimmed straw hats like mine. Upon arriving at a town hall, he would slap his hat upside down on the table and say, "Gentlemen, there's your new municipal pool. For this is how a Bintz pool was built, like an upside-down boater. The bowl of the hat providing the pool itself, and the brim would provide the sun deck area. Showers and locker rooms were located underneath the brim."
Most pools being built around that time were in-ground pools, and so Bintz salesmen would take that hat and explain that they could fit all of the showers, the locker rooms, the concessions, and the pool all in one building. Their idea was, this is gonna save you money, we don't have to dig, and it's all right here. Secondly, all of Bintz's pools were built near rivers to offset the costs of emptying and draining the pool. I'm sure that won't have any long-term effects on any of these pools. The first Brand Park pool was built in 1926. Considering the Bintz pool patent didn't come until 1926, it's probably safe to guess that the first Brand Park pool was one of the first Wesley Bintz pools. And yes, I did say the first Brand Park pool. The one we see standing today is the second version of the pool. A little more than 100 Wesley Bintz above-ground swimming pools were constructed between 1919 and the 1960s.
Wesley Bintz managed to sell over 100 such pools using this design very economically, even during the Great Depression.
Today, only around 15 of those iconic above-ground pools are still standing. And the state of the ones that have survived range from renovated and open to nearly unrecognizable ruins. This is the Margaret Manson Memorial Pool in Marlin Heights Park in Weirton, West Virginia. It was built in 1934 and it closed in 2005. With memberships dwindling and rising upkeep costs of the pool, in 2005, the pool suffered the same fate as the Elmira Brand Park pool and closed its doors for the very last time. This is the Payne Memorial Park pool. It was built in 1947. It's one of the very few pools still standing, and it's on the even smaller list of pools that is operational during the summertime. In the 80s, this pool got a large renovation, which includes a large steel frame slide in this kind of house. The city has managed to keep the pool open, but not without a fight due to expensive renovations and costly maintenance every year. but it's in relatively better shape than a lot of the other ones. Since this pool and the second Brand Park pool were built around the same time, I thought that it was interesting how similarly the parks and the pools look to each other. This is Kuskoden Swimming Pool in Kuskoden Park, Tampa, Florida. And I randomly had the opportunity to come visit this park while working on this video. This is one of the only pools of all of the pools that were built that is still operating. Unfortunately, I missed the operating hours by about an hour, but they are open and there's so many cars parked here and it seems like it's a very vibrant place. This pool was built in 1937, and then it seems like many of the other pools in the 1990s, it went through a very hard time where the city wasn't sure if it was going to continue to invest the money into it being a swimming pool or not. After around $3 million in renovations, in 2005 the pool opened once more. It's closed a couple of times again since then, but as of right now is open. I'm really happy that I had the opportunity to come visit, and this park is beautiful. If you used to or currently live in Elmira, chances are you know at least a few things about the city. Elmira, the prison camp, Mark Twain, the writer, and the floods. The most prominent of those floods being the flood of '72. Its devastation is often attributed to the steady decline of the life that was once so coveted and promoted in Elmira. There was a previous flood that did its fair share of devastation. The first Brand Park pool was built in 1926, and it looked like this. That was until 1946 when it looked like this. The pool was completely rebuilt 3 years later in 1949. That's the building that we see today. So now it's the 1950s. The Depression isn't as depressing, and there's a brand new Brand Park pool. Say that 5 times fast. This is the part of the pool's history that is often most reminisced by Elmirans. Things were never really the same in Elmira after the flood of 1972. With mass devastation across the valley, Elmira has had a very, very slow climb back ever since. And Brand Park Pool was absolutely no exception. With funding slowly draining, the pool and the park were both in rough shape. In the 1990s, a group of small business owners, all residing just 2 streets over from the park, began an initiative to make the park more inviting and welcoming for families in the community again. At first calling it the Maple Avenue Task Force, and later rebranding to the Brand Park Beautification Committee. The pool has been permanently closed since the end of the summer season in 2005. And besides the occasional graffiti cover-up, tree removal, boards on the doors, or bars on the windows, the pool has been mostly left alone to rot. That doesn't mean there haven't been attempts to restore the beloved landmark, but nostalgia does not always mean action or change. Dan Royle, the 5th District City Councilman at the time, has long been involved in Brand Park. He's the current president of the Brand Park Beautification Committee.
It was one of the few things we had that was called discretionary spending, right? We had a choice. We either kept it open, spent the money on it, or we didn't, right? And that money could be used to either for other things or to offset maybe a little higher tax increase, right? So we had to be very judicious. There was an awful lot of kids that needed a pool.
Dan spent a number of years on the council trying to find different avenues for the pool to reopen or be renovated like some of the other pools have in the country. But unfortunately, nothing ever came of it.
I'm okay with it now, so it's time. And I think we have to just make a new future. That's really sometimes what it's all about.
Okay, not that I actually want to, but let's revisit my fears. It's hard at times to feel like I'm not just living in an endless cycle that hasn't already been played out before.
Sometimes it's difficult to feel hopeful about the efforts I make now, as if they won't just be retried in 20 or 30 years by someone else with a lot more conviction and passion and talent than I ever had. I'm afraid that it's true. History repeats itself. But it'd be unfair of me to recognize this cycle without recognizing the little pieces of progress that I make day to day and that the world makes day to day. Yeah, I don't look different from yesterday, and yeah, the world isn't at peace because of my efforts, but I can make small advancements in my relationships with people and the world around me that are noticeable and commendable in big ways. I'm afraid of being stuck in a cycle. Believing in change isn't easy, but that shouldn't stop us from trying. Fear of failure feeds falsified thoughts that little change isn't important, but it is.
Nearly 100 years ago, a group of people came together for the community and raised money for the first pool. Over 70 years ago, it was rebuilt after being destroyed in a flood. And then 50 years ago, it was repaired again after being damaged by another flood. 30 years ago, a group of people band together to try to rehabilitate the park. And then just in the last 20 years, there have been numerous groups of people attempting to bring the pool back to what it once was. In the last few years, the city has been making some huge revitalization efforts to the downtown and surrounding areas. It finally has the money to do those things.
We were fortunate. We received $28 million of ARP funding from the federal government during the COVID relief plan that they initiated.
But unfortunately, the time has come and gone to save the pool. It's been completely empty and non-operational for almost 20 years. The walls are caving in, the bowl is cracked from tree roots making their way through. It's a shame that the city was never able to recover quickly enough to make the pool a priority.
Today is Saturday, December 3rd, 2022, and this article was posted this morning by the Weirton Daily Times. The Margaret Manson Memorial Pool is slated for demolition beginning as early as Monday, December 6th. Luckily for this pool, it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1993. Unfortunately, the Brand Park Pool has not. Cody Shingle, the board director of the park, went on to say, "We're very aware of the historic significance of the pool. Nobody, including myself or the park board, ever wanted to consider such a drastic measure with a historic structure. But it's about public safety at this point."
Today was a day many in Weirton hoped would never come. The demolition of the Margaret Manson Weir Memorial Pool was in full swing. Residents of the neighborhood and beyond worked for years to try to preserve and restore the closed pool to service, but it became a question of safety to the city.
And that is unfortunately the case with a lot of these pools, if they haven't already been demolished. I'm just really happy that I was able to get here just a few days before it was demolished to see it. The city of Elmira has decided to tear down the Brand Park Memorial Pool 2023.
We're going to use some of that funding. We have $28 million of ARP funding for the pool. Unfortunately, it's not going to be able to restore the pool. What we're going to try to do is the next best thing. We're going to demolish the pool probably this upcoming year. We're going to be getting bids here shortly. And then we're going to put in a splash pad, state-of-the-art splash pad where kids can come and enjoy where the Brand Pool was and at least have something to go to and
For the community.
Yeah, for the community. Yeah. And something to do for these kids.
At this point, I'm just happy that a decision is being made. Structures can't last forever, and it's not fair for the structure to just sit in ruins indefinitely. I'm not sure if a splash pad is the right decision, considering how this splash pad is going. But sometimes it's not always about the right decision. Sometimes it's just about making a decision and then taking the next step. But I think it's important for us to remind ourselves enough of the past, enough to not repeat it. But I think it's important for us to remind ourselves enough of the past, enough to not repeat it. Because if history repeats itself, then the end of this pool is not the end of this community coming together. I think this story is a lot more about resilience and the lingering hope in communities than it ever was about a pool. It's crazy to think that 150 years ago, this was all just a tobacco field. Who knows what it'll be 150 years from now?
I'd love to hear your stories of Bram Park Pool, and if you've ever had the opportunity to visit any of the other Wesley Bintz pools, leave a comment below and I'd love to hear about it. And I'll leave reference links for all of the things that I talked about in this video right below the like button. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe so that you'll see next time that I upload a video, and I'll see that you can be convinced. Bye. This video took me a long time to make, so some of the information has changed. The only information that will continue to change is that more of these pools are closing, and more of them are being torn down every year. So I know there's a number of posts. I believe even the North Towanda pool in Buffalo that I visited, they're no longer open. So there's examples of that. Many other pools that I did not get to visit that I would have loved to have visited further on the West Coast, but that just wasn't in my driving reach. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching. Again, I'll say it 1,000 times, but I appreciate you. And if you want to get coffee sometime, let me know. Like, get me coffee. Like, I'll put my Venmo. You can just, like, send me money for coffee. Could use coffee. Alright. Bye.